Welcome. Get comfortable, settle into your pillow, and let the ancient world carry you gently towards sleep. Tonight, we're traveling back thousands of years to the banks of the Nile, where one of the greatest civilizations in human history rose from desert sand and river mud. Here are 100 cozy facts about ancient Egypt, told softly, just for you. 1. The ancient Egyptian civilization lasted for more than 3,000 years, from roughly 3100 BC to 30 BC. That is longer than the entire span of time between the fall of Rome and today. 2. The Nile River flooded every year between June and September, depositing rich black soil across the floodplain. Egyptians called their country Kemet, meaning the Black Land, after this fertile earth. 3. The Great Pyramid of Giza was the tallest structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. It was not surpassed until Lincoln Cathedral in England was completed in the year 1311. 4. Ancient Egyptians invented one of the earliest forms of paper, called papyrus. It was made from the pith of the papyrus plant, which grew abundantly along the Nile. 5. Cats were deeply revered in Egypt. When a family cat died, household members would shave their eyebrows in mourning. 6. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, lived closer in time to the moon landing than to the construction of the Great Pyramid. 7. Egyptian physicians were among the most advanced in the ancient world. They could set broken bones, perform surgery, and had hundreds of pharmaceutical recipes. 8. The Sphinx at Giza was carved from a single enormous limestone outcrop. Its body stretches 73 meters long, and it has the face of a human and the body of a lion. 9. Ancient Egyptians played a board game called Senet, which dates back to around 3500 BC. It may be the oldest board game in the world. 10. Honey was so valued that it was sometimes used as currency. Jars of honey found in Egyptian tombs were still edible after 3,000 years. 11. The ancient Egyptians believed the heart was the center of intelligence and emotion. During mummification, the brain was discarded, but the heart was carefully preserved inside the body. 12. Egyptian women had more legal rights than women in most other ancient civilizations. They could own property, initiate divorce, and serve as witnesses in court. 13. The Rosetta Stone, discovered in 1799, was the key that allowed scholars to finally decode Egyptian hieroglyphics. It contained the same text in 3 scripts: hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek. 14. Pharaohs wore a false beard made of gold or other precious materials as a symbol of divine authority. Even the female pharaoh Hatshepsut wore one. 15. The Great Pyramid contains an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. Some granite blocks in the king's chamber weigh up to 80 tons. 16. Egyptian blue, created by heating sand, copper, and natron together, was the first synthetically produced color pigment in human history. 17. The ancient city of Thebes, modern-day Luxor, was the religious capital of Egypt and home to the enormous Karnak temple complex, the largest religious building ever constructed. 18. Egyptians used natron, a natural mineral salt, as a cleaning agent, a preservative, and a key ingredient in the mummification process. 19. The Nile is the longest river in Africa. Ancient Egyptians oriented themselves by the river. South was Upper Egypt, closer to the Nile's source, and north was Lower Egypt, near the Mediterranean delta. 20. Egyptian builders used ramps, levers, and sledges to move massive stones. Recent evidence suggests they wetted the sand in front of sledges to reduce friction by half. 21. The Eye of Horus was a powerful symbol of protection, healing, and restoration. It also represented mathematical fractions used in measuring grain and medicine. 22. Ancient Egypt had a surprisingly advanced plumbing system. Copper pipes have been found inside pyramids, and wealthy homes had indoor bathrooms with limestone toilets. 23. Pharaoh Ramesses II fathered over 100 children during his 90-year lifetime. He is believed to have had at least 8 principal wives and dozens of secondary ones. 24. The Valley of the Kings, located on the west bank of the Nile near Thebes, contains 63 known tombs, including the famous tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered in 1922. 25. Ancient Egyptians believed the afterlife was a physical place called the Field of Reeds, a paradise that mirrored the best of earthly life, with abundant crops and gentle breezes. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your body sink a little deeper. We are only a quarter of the way through, and the night is long and warm. 26. Toothpaste was an Egyptian invention. Their recipes included crushed rock salt, dried iris flowers, pepper, and mint. 27. The sacred scarab beetle represented the sun god Khepri and symbolized rebirth and transformation. Egyptians carved scarabs from stone and wore them as amulets. 28. Egyptian astronomers mapped the stars with remarkable accuracy. They divided the night sky into 36 star groups called decans, and their observations helped create one of the first calendars. 29. The first known peace treaty in history was signed between Egypt and the Hittite Empire around 1258 BC, after the Battle of Kadesh. A copy hangs in the United Nations headquarters in New York. 30. Mummification took about 70 days to complete. The internal organs were removed and stored in 4 canopic jars, each guarded by a different protective deity. 31. Bread and beer were the staple foods of ancient Egypt. Workers building the pyramids received daily rations of both. 32. Egyptian children, both boys and girls, shaved their heads except for a single braid on the side, called the sidelock of youth. 33. The obelisks that now stand in cities like London, Paris, Rome, and New York were originally quarried and erected in Egypt thousands of years ago. 34. Lighthouse technology began in ancient Egypt. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, built around 280 BC, was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world and stood over 100 meters tall. 35. Egyptians loved perfume. They infused oils with myrrh, frankincense, and lotus blossoms. Some perfume recipes were closely guarded secrets of the temples. 36. Hieroglyphics were not a simple alphabet. The writing system used over 700 distinct symbols, combining pictograms, ideograms, and phonetic elements. 37. The ancient Egyptians invented the 365-day calendar. They divided the year into 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 extra festival days at the end. 38. Kohl, the dark eyeliner worn by Egyptians, was not just decorative. It contained lead salts that helped protect against eye infections and reduced glare from the harsh desert sun. 39. The bent pyramid at Dashur was one of the earliest attempts at building a smooth-sided pyramid. Halfway up, the builders changed the angle, giving it its distinctive bent shape. 40. The ancient Egyptians had a deep love of music. They played harps, flutes, lutes, and percussion instruments. Music accompanied religious ceremonies, banquets, and work in the fields. 41. Papyrus boats were among the earliest watercraft. Egyptians bundled dried papyrus reeds together to make lightweight boats for fishing and traveling along the Nile. 42. The god Thoth, depicted with the head of an ibis, was the patron of writing, wisdom, and the moon. The Egyptians credited him with inventing hieroglyphics. 43. Egyptian embalmers sometimes placed small linen pads inside the eye sockets of mummies, then painted them to look like eyes, so the deceased could see in the afterlife. 44. The Aswan quarry in southern Egypt contains an unfinished obelisk that, if completed, would have been the largest ever erected, standing over 40 meters tall and weighing nearly 1,200 tons. 45. Ancient Egyptians kept many animals as pets, including dogs, cats, monkeys, gazelles, and even tame geese. 46. The Book of the Dead was not a single book, but a collection of spells and instructions written on papyrus scrolls, placed inside coffins to guide the deceased through the afterlife. 47. Egyptian farmers used a simple tool called a shaduf, a long pivoting pole with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other, to lift water from the Nile into irrigation channels. 48. The step pyramid at Saqqara, designed by the architect Imhotep around 2600 BC, is considered the earliest large-scale stone building in human history. 49. Imhotep was not only an architect. He was also a physician, a high priest, and later deified as a god of medicine. He may be the first genius whose name history has preserved. 50. We are halfway through now. Let any remaining tension leave your shoulders. Imagine the soft glow of oil lamps reflected on painted temple walls and the distant sound of the Nile's current in the dark. 51. Egyptian goldsmiths were masters of their craft. King Tutankhamun's burial mask is made of 24 pounds of solid gold and remains one of the most recognizable artifacts in the world. 52. The Nile Delta is shaped like the Greek letter delta, which is actually how the letter got its name. Herodotus coined the term when he visited Egypt in the 5th century BC. 53. Ancient Egyptians believed that dreams were messages from the gods. Dream interpretation was an important practice, and there were official dream interpreters at the temples. 54. Limestone was the most commonly used building material, quarried locally near the pyramids. The fine white casing stones that once covered the Great Pyramid came from quarries across the Nile at Tura. 55. Pharaoh Hatshepsut was one of the most successful rulers in Egyptian history. She expanded trade, commissioned enormous building projects, and reigned for over 20 years. 56. The Ankh, a cross with a loop at the top, was the Egyptian symbol for life. Gods and pharaohs were often depicted holding the Ankh in paintings and carvings. 57. Egyptian blue lotus flowers were associated with the sun and rebirth. They bloom in the morning and close at night, symbolizing the daily journey of the sun god Ra. 58. The bent pyramid still retains much of its original smooth limestone casing, giving us a rare glimpse of what the pyramids looked like when they were new. 59. Ancient Egyptians brewed at least 17 varieties of beer and at least 24 types of wine. Beer was so important that it was used in religious offerings and as medicine. 60. The Temple of Abu Simbel was carved directly into a sandstone cliff by Ramesses II. It was designed so that twice a year, sunlight would illuminate the inner sanctuary and bathe the statues of the gods in light. 61. Flax was the most important textile crop. Linen made from flax was the primary fabric for clothing, ranging from simple loincloths for workers to fine, nearly transparent garments for the wealthy. 62. The Egyptians built a canal connecting the Nile to the Red Sea, predating the Suez Canal by more than 2,000 years. 63. Amun-Ra was the supreme god of the New Kingdom period, a fusion of Amun, the hidden god of Thebes, and Ra, the sun god. 64. Egyptian doctors specialized in different parts of the body. There were eye doctors, tooth doctors, belly doctors, and doctors for internal diseases, much like modern medicine. 65. The ancient Egyptians domesticated the donkey around 3000 BC. It became the primary beast of burden for transporting goods across the desert. 66. Turquoise was mined in the Sinai Peninsula and was one of the most prized gemstones. It was associated with the goddess Hathor and was used in jewelry and amulets. 67. The Ebers Papyrus, dating to around 1550 BC, is one of the oldest known medical texts. It contains over 700 remedies for ailments ranging from asthma to crocodile bites. 68. Wigs were commonly worn by both men and women in high society. They were made from human hair, sheep's wool, or plant fibers, and were sometimes scented with beeswax and resin. 69. The pyramids were not built by slaves, as was once commonly believed. Evidence shows that the builders were paid laborers who were well fed and received medical care. 70. Let your eyelids rest for a moment if they feel heavy. The facts will still be here, drifting through the warm Egyptian night. 71. The ancient Egyptians were the first people known to have used pillows, though theirs were carved from wood or stone and designed to keep the head cool. 72. Faience, a glazed ceramic material, was one of Egypt's signature crafts. It was used to make small figurines, beads, tiles, and amulets in brilliant shades of blue and green. 73. The nilometer was a device used to measure the water level of the Nile during its annual flood. Tax rates were set according to the flood level, because a higher flood meant more fertile land and a better harvest. 74. Egyptian children played with toys remarkably similar to modern ones, including balls, dolls, spinning tops, and small animal figurines with movable limbs. 75. The Great Pyramid was originally covered in polished white limestone that reflected the sunlight so brilliantly that it could be seen from great distances and was called the Ikhit, meaning the glorious light. 76. Canopic jars had lids shaped like the four sons of Horus. Seti, with a human head, protected the liver. Hapi, with a baboon head, guarded the lungs. Duamutef, with a jackal head, protected the stomach. And Kebesenuf, with a falcon head, watched over the intestines. 77. The sistrum was a musical instrument, a type of rattle associated with the goddess Hathor. Its jingling sound was believed to ward off evil spirits. 78. Granite was transported hundreds of kilometers from the quarries at Aswan to building sites at Giza and elsewhere. How the Egyptians moved such massive stones over such distances remains a subject of wonder. 79. The ancient Egyptians kept detailed records of the star Sirius, which they called Soptit. Its annual reappearance in the dawn sky heralded the Nile flood and marked the beginning of their new year. 80. Ma'at was the Egyptian concept of truth, balance, order, and justice. A feather from the goddess Ma'at was used in the afterlife to weigh against the heart of the deceased. Only those whose hearts were light enough could enter paradise. 81. Egyptian temples were not places of public worship like modern churches. They were considered the homes of the gods, and only priests were permitted to enter the innermost sanctuaries. 82. The lotus flower appears throughout Egyptian art and architecture. Its ability to rise from muddy waters and bloom in the morning light made it a symbol of creation and the sun. 83. Scribes were among the most respected members of Egyptian society. Only about 1% of the population could read and write, and literacy was a path to power. 84. The Egyptians developed a sophisticated system of fractions, though they generally only used unit fractions. Fractions with 1 as the numerator, like 1/2, 1/3, or 1/7. 85. The goddess Isis was one of the most widely worshipped deities in the ancient world. Her cult eventually spread throughout the Roman Empire, reaching as far as Britain. 86. Ancient Egyptian houses were made of mud bricks dried in the sun. Even the palaces of pharaohs used the same material, which is why so few domestic buildings have survived. 87. The Egyptians used a form of sundial called a shadow clock as early as 1500 BC. Water clocks, called clepsydra, were used to tell time at night. 88. Papyrus was not just used for writing. Egyptians also made sandals, mats, baskets, rope, and even small boats from the versatile plant. 89. Mummified animals have been found by the millions in Egypt, including cats, dogs, ibises, baboons, crocodiles, and even beetles, many offered as gifts to the gods. 90. Just 10 more facts remain. The night is deepening, and the stars above the Nile are impossibly bright. Let each fact drift past like a quiet boat on the river. 91. The pyramids of Giza are aligned with remarkable precision to the cardinal points of the compass. The margin of error is less than 1/15 of a degree. 92. Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BC and founded the city of Alexandria, which became one of the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world. 93. The Library of Alexandria was the most famous library of antiquity. At its peak, it may have held as many as 400,000 scrolls. 94. Cleopatra spoke at least 9 languages and was the first ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty to learn Egyptian. She was known for her intellect as much as her political skill. 95. The Fayum portraits, painted on wooden panels and placed over the faces of mummies, are among the most lifelike artworks to survive from the ancient world. Their startling realism continues to move people today. 96. The ancient Egyptians believed in a cosmic serpent called Apophis who tried to devour the sun each night as it traveled through the underworld. Each dawn was proof that the sun god had defeated the serpent once more. 97. The desert beyond the Nile Valley was called Deseret, the Red Land. It served as a natural barrier against invasion and as a vast, silent reminder of the fragility of life beside the river. 98. When Howard Carter first peered into Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 and was asked if he could see anything, he replied with the now famous words, "Yes, wonderful things." 99. The last hieroglyphic inscription ever carved was found at the Temple of Isis on the island of Philae, dated to the year 394 AD. After that, the ability to read hieroglyphics was lost for over 1,400 years. 100. Ancient Egypt endures because it reminds us of something deep and quiet inside ourselves. The desire to build something lasting, to leave a mark that outlasts a single lifetime, to face the mystery of death with beauty and care. Those pyramids still standing in the desert are proof that even the heaviest stones can be lifted, and that the work of human hands, given enough patience, can touch eternity. And now let the Nile carry you. The torches are dimming. The temple doors are closing for the night. You have traveled 3,000 years and back again, and the only thing left to do is rest. Good night.